Hi everyone, I'm Mono and welcome to my beginner's guide to Hunt Showdown. There are a lot of guides out there for this game, but I find most are super focused on the PvE part of it without much being said about PvP engagements and how they play out. And the thing is, sticking to PvE guidelines is bound to get you destroyed when engaging with human players. So I'm gonna divide this guide into 3 sections. First, I'll be going over some of the quirks of the progression system and menu that most beginners seem not to notice or pay attention to. Then I'll briefly go over the PvE aspects, and I do mean briefly. I won't be going into every single enemy and how to defeat them because other guys have done that already. And finally, I will go over the PvP side of things, which is arguably the single most important part that you need to improve on and the one most players will struggle with. I will focus on what worked best and made the most difference during my own learning process. I'm still relatively new at this game, I'm still learning, but that means I remember the things that have made me improve the most, and that's what I will share in this video. So if you want some tips that will improve your gameplay really fast and significantly, then stick around. Alright, let's start with the basics by taking a look at the menu and learning how to unlock weapons, how to get better hunters, and go over some of the basic setups to get you started with the right tools for each match. The menu can be quite confusing and can take a while to understand. You might think it's silly to look at the menu screen as part of this guide, but trust me, you will be glad that you did. Up top you have the lobby, which are basically your game modes. Trials mode is like a speedrun challenge with set enemies, weapons, and traps. That's really not very good in my opinion, and quick play is like a reduced bounty hound version where you collect clues but there's really no monster to slay. You can earn both currencies, items, and skins by playing trials, and in quick play you will find a lot of random weapons scattered all around the map, and since both the weapons and hunters that you extract will be kept in your inventory, it is worthwhile if you're desperately out of cash. Otherwise, I wouldn't really bother with it. The player count for this mode also seems to be really low, so matchmaking can take quite a while. The progress tab will basically show you information on your upcoming unlocks, but that's also available in other parts of the menu in a much better format, and not all the unlocks are listed here. The most useful screen here is the last match screen. This is where you can send a quick friend invite to someone you did really good with in the last match. The Steam recently played with tab doesn't seem to work for Hunt Showdown, which means you need to go here instead. Finding people to play this game is the #1 best way to get better at the game. The random matchmaking not only takes a while, but you also don't know who you're going to play with. You might get matched with veteran players who are going to take one look at your level and nope out of the match, or with new players that have absolutely no clue what they're doing. I highly recommend you check out the official Discord, to which I will link to below in the video description, because you'll find players looking to group up in literally seconds. Just taking a quick glance, there's groups being created around every 5 to 10 minutes. Players that are actively looking for other players to befriend and add so they can play the game are the people that you want to play with, since they will be willing to teach you more than any guide, and just seeing them in action will inform your gameplay a whole lot. Definitely take the plunge if you're not a regular Discord user and take advantage of the community. You won't regret it. Moving on, the roster is where you buy or recruit hunters and also buy and equip weapons and items for them. You get a free hunter after every match with this free reshuffle option, so make sure you do that after every match. You should also take a look at the non-free hunters that you can buy as well, since these will come with more equipment and some perks already unlocked. So if you see someone with really good perks and equipment, you might want to pick them up. This is one of the things that a lot of new players seem to miss. Most of the time they're not worth it, but do keep an eye out for good ones. I'll go over a few perks because some of the best ones have really awful descriptions that really don't convey what they actually do. Iron Repeater, for example, says remain in iron sights after firing a shot while using lever action rifles. What this actually does is increase your fire rate while aiming down sights with weapons like the Winfield. Levering does the same thing, so if you're using the Winfield, there is really no reason not to pick both of these traits up. Iron Sharpshooter is obviously the same as Iron Repeater, but for bolt action rifles. Bolt action rifles and breech loaded rifles are not the same thing, so the ones you crack open will not be affected by this perk. In terms of equipment, there's a basic setup that everyone seems to agree on for starting out, which is as follows. For your tools, a knife and first aid kit. The knife is for all the melee kills that you'll be doing in the game, which should be most if not all for the PvE, and the first aid kit obviously for healing. I'd add fuses to this list because they can be quite handy. These are basically flares that you can use to blow up barrels, light enemies on fire, or toss inside buildings to make it harder for people to peek windows without standing out like a sore thumb. For your consumables, a vitality shot or weak vitality shot, a firebomb, and some dynamite. You might have heard people talking about burning down the corpses of enemy hunters. Basically, once you take a hunter down, you might want to try and burn their bodies if it's safe to do so. The purpose behind this is primarily to force their teammates out of cover if they want to recover their downed player. When you burn a corpse, you start to deplete the downed enemy's health bar permanently, which means that if they get revived, their max health will be much lower, which is obviously great for you and really bad for the enemy team. You can also use the lamps that you find around the map to do this. The ones that you pick up that aren't lit will explode in a fiery blaze once they are thrown. This is very useful for trickling down the health of enemy bosses as well. In terms of weapons, most people advocate for the Winfield as a great starter rifle, and I completely agree. It's pretty accurate and has a decent fire rate as well as tons of ammo. It's basically a cheap, great all-rounder weapon that's used by all types of players, so, it's really good. However, unless you land a headshot, you're going to need 2 shots to down someone. So if you find yourself getting shots reliably into other hunters and wishing each of those shots was an actual kill, then you might want to pick something like the Sparks LRR, which you unlock at rank 26. It deals 149 damage, and since every hunter has 150 health, that means if they are at all damaged by anything, they will die. It also has a 250 meter effective range compared to the Winfield's 90 meter and higher bullet velocity, meaning it's easier to land shots. If you want to go with a shotgun, I'd recommend using the Caldwell Rival 78, which is a double barrel shotgun. Just point it at someone, click twice, and boom, they're dead. There's a very slight delay between shots, but this thing is absolutely deadly at close range and can deal decent damage at medium range as well. Also, the reload is pretty fast compared to other single shot shotguns, and you're getting 2 shots per reload instead of 1, which comes in handy since a lot of players will push you if you miss that first shot thinking that you need to reload, and then you'll be able to make them regret that really fast. For your second slot, I recommend going with a pistol like the Caldwell Conversion or the Silenced Nagant. The Silenced Nagant is very accurate and will allow you to deal with some of the more dangerous PvE enemies silently, making it a great choice when you're still learning the game. Though you do want to melee pretty much every enemy out there, there's really no way to get at least slightly damage when engaging some of the monsters that roam around the bayou without using a ranged weapon. Later on, you can forgo the silencer and pick up the throwing knives to accomplish this. That said, the Caldwell is all around just better than the Silent Nagant, with better range, better damage, better handling, and better bullet velocity. You will also earn XP for unlocking the Caldwell Chain Pistol while using it, which is basically a belt-fed revolver with a ton of bullets that can be really fantastic for close quarters. By the way, handling is a metric that takes into account things like recoil, bullet spread, and weapon sway, so stick to guns with good handling for the most part to make the most out of every shot. Both the Caldwell shotgun and the Sparks are kind of expensive main weapons, but they are absolutely worth it. However, don't obsess over which weapon is the best, since they all have their drawbacks and you don't really want to buy something too expensive when you first start out. Keep in mind, all sawn-off and shorter versions of rifles will sacrifice handling or bullet velocity, making them less reliable, so I wouldn't recommend them because when you start out, your positioning in PvP engagements won't be the best, meaning you want to at least have the benefit of having accurate weapons. Once you get better, you can overcome the bad handling with superior gameplay. Lastly, there's the recruitment tab and the store. The recruitment tab is where you get new hunters, and the store is an excellent way of checking out weapons and equipments that you haven't unlocked and seeing what you need to achieve in order to unlock them. So if you want to check and see what you need to unlock a specific variant or a brand new weapon, this is where you want to go. The other option is going to the weapons manual under the library tab and checking there for a more complete and orderly list. The main unlocks that you want to go for early on are the Vitality Shot, which you unlock by using the weak Vitality Shot, the Throwing Knives by killing zombies with the regular knife, and the Hellfire Bomb by killing things with the Fire Bomb. A good trick to unlock these early is have your team shoot at you before extracting to use the weak Vitality Shot and level it up, and the same goes for the Fire Bomb. Just toss it at a group of enemies if you can before extracting if there's no one around. Lastly, once you get your hunter up to level 30, you should retire them. This will increase your blood rank, which is what governs the unlocks of some of the better traits and weapons, so you want to do that as fast as possible. The first time you should do this is after reaching, I think it's blood rank 11, since before that you will still keep your hunter if he or she dies anyway. There's a huge reminder about this once you actually reach the point where they will die, so, it's hard to miss. So once you do reach that point, retire any high level hunters that you have and get the XP. Alright, now let's get on to the PvE side of things. The first most general rule here is to melee everything. Melee attacks with the knife or the butt of your gun are what you want to use to kill almost every single enemy. The few exceptions are the meathead, which is this huge blind zombie surrounded by leeches. Once the leeches attack you, the meathead will come for you, which is not something you want. Depending on the situation, you might ignore the meathead or kill it by throwing some dynamite at it, because they will occasionally drop a random perk which you want to pick up when it dies. Basically, if you run into one in your first compound with a new hunter, then kill it, otherwise probably don't. If you're in the middle of a match with an already leveled up hunter, you probably don't want to risk making that much noise. Immolators, which are the fiery ones, can be taken down with 2 heavy attacks, a light attack, and another heavy attack, since this will interrupt their attacks and you won't take any damage. Do not shoot them or attack them with anything that cuts, since that will make them blaze up and start burning everything around them. Hives, which are the zombie ladies with the bugs around them, are basically the only ranged PvE enemy in the game, as they will launch a swarm of bugs at you that will poison and damage you. Either go for a quick melee kill by just running straight towards them and knifing their head, or avoid them or shoot them if absolutely necessary. You won't take much damage if you sprint directly towards them and knife them. And if you do get swarmed by the bees, then use your melee and that will take them off you. As a general rule, you want to always avoid triggering any sound alarms like the crows, ducks, horses, and chickens and dog kennels. These are your high tier sound traps, with others like chains and broken bottles being the lower tier. Each of these has a specific range, but you don't have to really crouch around most of them. Just walking around will do the trick. In fact, you don't ever want to be crouching around, and that's a very common mistake a lot of beginners make. Crouching makes you move very slowly, which yes, makes you very quiet, but also makes you extremely vulnerable. The lower tier sound triggers like glass on the floor, cans, and chains can only really be heard by other human enemies inside the same compound you're in, so just keep that in mind. Yes, you want to avoid them, but you don't want to base your entire movement around them. Kennels can be taken out by shooting the lamp that usually hangs over them, which you almost always want to do if you're afraid that you'll trigger them. Any throwable object is great for this, but if you remember what I said earlier about the silenced pistol, this is one of the reasons why it's a great starter weapon. Early on, you won't have the throwing knives unlocked, so, it's kind of hard to handle these traps unless you have a ranged silent option, which the Nagant definitely is. One other option is to take the fuses or however you pronounce them, that are both quite cheap and come in packs of 3, making them quite useful when you need something generic to throw around. And lastly, bosses aren't really super tough in this game. Just take your turns with your teammates, light them on fire with lamps, and melee them with the weapons that you can pick up that are just lying around. If you get hit, back away and wait to recover, and remember that once you start banishing, you will get your health back, so if you're close to that, don't use any medkits to heal up. The main goal here is to kill the boss as fast as possible to minimize the chances of another team engaging you while you're fighting. So charge up a heavy attack, strike, back away, do that again, and then have your partner do the same while you recover. It's generally pretty easy. Alright, now let's get down to the hardest part of the game, the PvP. First off, and this is something that I struggled with as a new player, you want to pretty much forget about the stealth part once you're in an actual shootout. You program yourself to be silent throughout most of the game, but that has to change when you're in a gunfight. If you're being shot at and you're seeing the enemy and you're engaging them, your number one priority should be positioning. That means run and get into cover if you need to, regardless of how loud you're gonna do that. Run across the back of a building to get a better angle on your enemy, and if there's chains or broken bottles, just run over them. If there's a zombie, shoot it. The other player already knows where you are, so making noise doesn't really matter if it helps you rotate. If you've ever played Counter-Strike or Rainbow Six Siege, I highly suggest you treat Hunt like you do those games. Don't ever crouch unless you absolutely know it's safe to do so, because crouching makes you a sitting target. Obviously, this doesn't mean draw more attention than necessary by being intentionally loud, but speed is key. If there's a hive enemy or an immolator that you know is going to start attacking you, then deal with that threat as quickly as possible and keep focusing on the human players. There are some moments where you do want to be stealthy though, like being stealthy when you're approaching a compound where you know another team is locating and you know they haven't noticed you coming up. If you're pushing the building where the monster is being banished and there's a team inside, you absolutely want to be as quiet as possible, since as soon as they hear you next to a window or something, the other team will have their aim ready or even shoot through the walls to try and hit you. The defending team usually has the advantage, so be mindful of that. If the other players have already banished the boss and have collected the bounty, they will have the dark sight to be able to see where you are, so at that point being stealthy is pretty much a non-option. The same goes for you if you're the one with the bounty. If you have the bounty, everyone knows where you are, so there is no point at all in being quiet. If you're on the move, move as fast as you can, and if you're engaged and fighting other players, reposition often. I'm sure you might have seen this mentioned elsewhere, but don't peek the same corner twice if you think the enemy might know where you are. It is almost never safe to do so. Pick your fights. Don't rush in to get things over with quickly. If you're trying to fight other players that are holed up inside a building, you don't need to push them if you know you're gonna die. You can either choose to be patient and position yourself for an ambush, or just run away. There's no one forcing you to keep engaging, so remember, there's always the option to disengage and try to extract if you don't have the upper hand. If you're playing trios and two of your teammates are dead, unless they have some really high level hunters and weapons that they want to get back, there's no point in trying to revive them if that's gonna get you killed. Just go for the extraction or run away to the middle of nowhere, make sure nobody's following you, and then go back once you think the server is empty. Most players will not mind if you extract without them, if it's pretty obvious you're gonna die if you engage. And this is something that you definitely want to consider doing if you've already got a couple of player kills, some clues, you know, if you've collected some experience or money or whatever. Something that a lot of players struggle with also is learning how to identify where shots are coming from and how far away they are. And there's a really cool trick that can make things much easier. When you start hearing shots, you should be able to tell precisely the direction the shots are coming from. What's not as simple is learning to identify how far away the enemies are. Point yourself towards the gunfire and pull out your map. Then project a line from your marker straight forwards, and if there's any compound, any set of buildings that directly cross that path, then that's probably where the shots are coming from. More often than not, you can use this and pinpoint exactly which location the enemies are in. If there are two or more possible places, then you'll have to try and guess at the proper distance by learning to judge that from the sounds, but being able to narrow down the possible locations by looking at the map will make your guesses more and more accurate each time. Alright, that's gonna be it. It's a pretty long video, but definitely try to keep it shorter and as short as possible for this type of game, which is actually an extremely complicated game. If this helped you, then please let me know down in the comment section, and if you have any other tips that you think are important, please share them down in the comment section. If you enjoyed this video, then please check out the rest of the channel and think about subscribing. As always, thank you for watching, and I hope I will catch you in the next one.